This video is sponsored by Surfshark. Stick around to find out more.
My God, it's worse than I thought. The AI machine is useless. Given the amount of nonsense on the internet, at least there's no aliens. It's painful. Did you do that deliberately to me?
No.
Did you ask?
No.
How could you do this? Do better, AI. Not just untrustworthy, but incompetent. Hey, I'm Dan Snow, and I must have done something terrible at the Christmas party because my team have dragged me in here to react to some AI images depicting great moments from world history. I've got a bad feeling about this. I'm feeling pretty nervous here. We're about to ignore all the beautiful, accurate images ever created by human beings. I want to be reviewing great movies, and you're making me look at this junk. Anyway, let's get on with it. Where to start? Well, it's the building of Stonehenge.
Absolutely correct.
It's a catastrophe. It's grotesque. It's attempting to depict the construction of the big trilithons, those big arches that are so symbolic, iconic at Stonehenge, the big outer circle, which is actually the last stones added to the Stonehenge monument. It's built over thousands of years. It began just as a ditch with a bank, and then they erected those blue stones, the smaller stones around it, and those kept getting rearranged, and finally they erected this big outer circle. Now, they are about 4 meters high. These appear to be about 10 meters high. The whole beauty of Stonehenge is that it's so superbly rounded and extraordinarily clever. They're straight. It's like they're building a Roman or Greek temple or colonnaded walkway. The landscape looks vaguely similar to Wiltshire, reasonably open rolling hills. We think that that chalky terrain would have been largely free of trees, which in itself made it so special because Britain was heavily forested at the time, and there would have been this big section of this part of southern England. It was strangely very open. I think that would have drawn people to the area. So that's perhaps a little bit of accuracy. What the... okay, I've just spotted... I don't know what's going on. There appear to be some... are they dogs? Oh, maybe they're... I don't know what these animals are. What's interesting is that AI's got something wrong here. It assumes that the stones always looked as old and sort of crumbly and cracked as they do today, but that's the result of thousands of years of weathering and freeze-thaw. When these sarsen stones were originally raised, they would have been smooth, they'd have been quite white, they'd have looked brand new, they'd have been very, very striking. Here they're looking far too old. Extraordinarily, these sarsens were brought from 19 miles away, and we don't really know how. If enough people get together, you can drag them over wet ground. You can also roll them on logs. It takes a huge number of people a long time to do it. One thing I like about the AI is it appears to show they're using these animal antlers to do some of the finishing work. And that's true, they would have used antlers, we're sure, to dig the ditch around Stonehenge, but they would have used rock tools to really shape these upright stones. What the AI is also attempting to do here, which is interesting, is show some of the other stones, so-called station stones, and there were 4 outer stones forming a perfect rectangle around Stonehenge, which were part of the solar alignment of this amazing site. Stonehenge is all built around the movement of the sun. On the longest day of the year, the sun actually rises right above one of these outer stones and shines straight through on the altar stone in the heart of Stonehenge, which recent research has shown came all the way from Scotland. What you don't see in this picture, I mean, obviously it's what you don't see because it's just made up. But what you don't see is how these uprights are joined to the lintels. There was something called a mortise and tenon. So on top of these, there was like a lump of stone that they left, and then they scooped out a little hole in the top, so they slotted it, very like a Lego brick. No women in this picture. The AI is not a feminist. Given the amount of nonsense on the internet, at least there's no aliens, fresh from building the pyramids, just whipping across and putting up Stonehenge. How did they get these stones upright? There must have been structures, we could call them cranes, pulleys, a gantry that allows lots and lots of humans to kind of pull this stone upright and slot it into a hole that had been dug for it. It's putting lots of wood around, sort of weird ladders. And the AI doesn't know. The AI doesn't know. Don't listen to the AI. Listen to the archaeologists. It isn't horrible. What was Eleanor's max?
I think maybe 4.
Okay, well, okay, maybe I'll I guess I'll give that a 6.
Has this made you excited for the next one?
Funnily enough, I am interested to see what the AI shows up. It is quite interesting. And actually, it's nice to respond to it, explore what it gets right and what it gets wrong. So yeah, actually, you know what? Show me a few more. Let's do this.
As AI technology gets more advanced, so do the lengths that people will go to in order to steal your personal data. But there are ways to fight back against this invasion of privacy. That's why we're excited to tell you about this video's sponsor, Surfshark. Surfshark is a virtual private network, keeping you shielded from prying eyes while you surf the web. For example, if you're accessing Wi-Fi in public, that connection can be compromised by people or AI that wants to steal your data. Surfshark protects that data for you, so nobody can access it but you. They have over 3,000 servers in over 100 countries around the world, which act as a barrier between you and any threat that might be trying to find out your IP address. This includes multiple devices as well, so whether you're on a mobile, a games console, or a computer, you're in safe hands. And you can get 24-hour support using Surfshark's live chat, emails, and social media. And if after everything Surfshark can do for you, you're not satisfied, you can get your money back in the first 30 days. So if you're ready to protect your personal data, click on the link in the description or go to surfshark.com/historyhit for 4 extra months of Surfshark for free.
I feel nervous. I feel naughty. It's the assassination of Julius Caesar, folks. I knew this one was coming up. There's something about this moment in history. It has got to be one of the most famous single incidents in history. We actually know quite a lot about it. 15th of March, 44 BC. Julius Caesar assassinated by members of the Senate. Julius Caesar was one of the most stunning military commanders in history, but he's an incredibly effective politician as well. He was a soldier, he was a politician, he was tough, and he secured various political offices. But his big breakthrough came when he was sent off to what is now France, Gaul. And when he was there, he went way beyond expectations that had been set for him, and he just conquered a vast empire across Western Europe. That was kind of a genocidal, brutal campaign that went on for years. And when he arrived back in Rome, he had enormous power and influence as a result. And he emerged as an emperor in all but name, a king in all but name, dominating the Roman Empire and its political elite. He was a dictator, really, and he was assassinated by people who wanted to remove his influence from the Roman Republic. Perhaps they wanted to take more power for the Senate, perhaps they were jealous, perhaps they wanted to replace him. But Julius Caesar had attained a position of such power and domination that enemies gathered and plotted to assassinate him on the Senate floor. He wasn't killed in the Senate House as it appears in Rome today. He was killed in the Theatre of Pompey. There was a curia, so a sort of meeting room for Roman senators. And as he went in there, as he approached his seat, senators, some of them he thought were his friends, gathered round him and started stabbing him. He'd been told not to go to the Senate that day. His wife had had a dream that there was blood flowing from Caesar. I think she must have heard rumours. There were rumours swirling around Rome. Every time you ask AI or a Hollywood director to do anything in the Roman world, everyone is in full armour the whole time. They were not in armour, they were other senators. This was a political meeting. They were not all dressed as Spartans from the Battle of Thermopylae, they're not all in 300. There's a guy on the floor here, I don't know what's happened to him. It looks like Julius Caesar's broken his ankle as well. Maybe as he fell down, he had a nasty twist there. Has Julius Caesar got a crown on his head? I don't know, maybe. Which is ironic because he was offered the crown a few times. He said, do you want to become king of Rome, like the way Rome had been a kingdom in the past? He pushed it away, each time more unwillingly. But anyway, he shouldn't have a crown on his head. I'm just not sure about the physiology of Caesar here. The giant Julius Caesar. There's arms and legs just sticking out in strange directions. That right arm looks uncomfortable. And is this guy stabbing him in the shoulder? I'm not sure. This is disturbing. Julius Caesar was stabbed repeatedly, but there's no evidence that his face melted. Speaking artistically, not as a historian, because it's nonsense, I quite like the side light here coming through this window, shining off Caesar's armour and on the breastplates here. I think he was wearing a white toga on the day, so I guess that's good. Rating this one, well, somebody called Julius Caesar was killed in a building with bladed weapons. I guess that the AI gets that right, but this building is ahistorical. The uniforms are ridiculous, the armor, the size, and then some of the physiology is a bit scary in this one. I'm afraid I'm giving this a 4. Let's have a look at one. Oh, now, why would you do this to me? You're deliberately winding me up. This is not the Battle of Trafalgar.
It is the Battle of Trafalgar.
No. The Battle of Trafalgar with the US flag? Did you do that deliberately to me?
No.
Did you ask?
No,
How could you do this?
I didn't do anything, it's all the AI.
No. I mean, it's not. Why couldn't AI just go online and just copy a picture of the Battle of Trafalgar? It's not that hard. Why would you do this? Why would you do this? Why would you despoil? Why would you ruin one of the greatest, most seminal events in history? Why? An event that Turner, so many other artists have painted. Do your job, I keep hearing AI is just copying stuff all the time. Why don't you copy it? You don't have to create harmful content like this. I think this is showing the moment at which the French ship Achilles blew up. It's right at the end of the Battle of Trafalgar, fought on the 21st of October 1805, because this appears to be some kind of explosion. Other than that, there is nothing in this image at all that could possibly be described as representative of the Battle of Trafalgar. The only reason I guessed it is because of that blowing up, and because my team know that I love Nelson and Trafalgar, and I also know that they did it to wind me up. And I suppose it's a battle fought by sail-powered battleships, and Trafalgar was the most famous of that era, the Age of Sail. So that's it, really. But let's just focus on this ship here. It is a scandal. That US flag, the USA was not present at the Battle of Trafalgar. It was a British victory over the French and Spanish fleets. It was during the Napoleonic Wars. The British were trying to do what they could using their naval superiority to take the fight to Napoleon and his Spanish allies at sea. A French and Spanish fleet emerged from Cadiz, trying to get round into the Mediterranean to support Napoleon's operations there. And they were intercepted by a British fleet that annihilated the French and Spanish fleet. One of the most complete and destructive naval battles in history. It led to the death of the British commander, the celebrated Vice Admiral Horatio Nelson. He was shot through the spine and lived just long enough to hear about his victory before he died. The ships at the Battle of Trafalgar mounted guns along their sides. So you'd have seen cannon sticking out on 2 or 3 rows, and some ships actually even 4 rows, along their sides here. This seems to have used ships from a much later period. That appears to be a smokestack, which is an abomination. There were no steam-powered vessels at the Battle of Trafalgar. If that's a funnel, then that's just the final insult. Horrifically inaccurate. These small boats, I think, just added in for bizarre detail. These are the ships, too indistinct, really, to tell what's going on. These may be cannon sticking out the edges here. I mean, one thing that the image gets right, probably by accident, is that it was a very confused battle. The French and Spanish fleet was arrayed in a big crescent. The British fleet sailed towards that crescent in 2 kind of quite organised lines. But once they penetrated the French and Spanish fleet, there was a melee. That was Nelson's plan. He knew that British gunnery was so much better than that of the French or Spanish. So he just wanted to get alongside the enemy as close as possible and use his ships to blast the enemy into submission. That's why we get the Achille blowing up here. The fire spread until it reached its gunpowder magazines, brought an end to the day's fighting in many ways. The ships are fully rigged ships, which is roughly correct. It's amazing. You had to fight the ship, you had to man the guns, but you also had to sail the ship. So there would have been sailors up here as well, and it would be one of those French troops up in the top there that shot down and mortally wounded Nelson. The Battle of Trafalgar is always celebrated as this hugely important victory that sort of secures British sea power for the next 100 years or so. And I think that's a slight exaggeration, but what it did do is it destroyed Napoleon's last attempt to put a big fleet out to sea. Never again until the end of Napoleon's reign, finally in 1815, 10 years later, would a big French fleet set out willing to fight the British. Trafalgar is seen as this climactic encounter between the British and the French and the Spanish. But rather than creating British naval superiority, it just confirmed it. The Brits already bossed the world's ocean. This put it absolutely beyond doubt.
The question is, does this image float your boat?
Does this image float my boat? When the English killed Joan of Arc, they burned her body twice to destroy every little fragment of her being, and then they scattered her ashes in a river to make sure it could never become a shrine to her. And that's what I want to do with this image here. I need to shred it, I need to burn it, I need to scatter it across the landscape under a full moon, so no evidence of its existence can it survive.
So I guess it's a 0?
It's getting... Yeah, I'll give it a 0. I'm now traumatized. Next one. Wow, a lot going on here. I had to think about this one for a second because I looked at the Red Cross on the breastplate and I thought this was maybe Crusades. What is going on with this? This mess coming out of his forehead and attached to a staff. It feels like King Harold of England getting hit by an arrow in the eye at the Battle of Hastings in October 1066.
Exactly.
Am I right? I'm right, okay. Horrible for so many reasons. The whole point about the Battle of Hastings AI, have you learned nothing while you have been illegally scraping my content from the internet, is that the English fought on foot and the Normans had a powerful cavalry element at the Battle of Hastings. That is the entire point. So King Harold was not on a horse. And also, while we're on the subject, if he had been on a horse, why is he on a winged horse? Why is he on Pegasus? There should not be wings. These horses could not fly. They still cannot do that. We're not even sure King Harold was hit by an arrow in the eye, but that's, I suppose, not really the AI's fault, because that is part of the popular story about the Battle of Hastings. But the most reliable source at the time seems to suggest that he was actually cut down by a hit squad. Duke William of Normandy's kind of elite units found him in the English shield wall, made for him in particular. Underneath his banners, it does at least show some banners, although they are horribly inaccurate. They had a banner of a fighting man, and then he had a banner of the Dragon of Wessex as well. And so William's men were able to identify Harold, hack their way in on horseback into the shield wall. They were on horseback, not Harold, and then they were able to cut him down and hack his body to pieces. But it is possible that he was hit by an arrow. The Bayeux Tapestry could possibly suggest that he was hit by an arrow in the eye later, although that may be... Anyway, we're getting the weeds here. That arrow's the wrong way. The arrowhead is actually pointing away from his forehead, and it seems to be attached to a pole that he's holding with some string. AI doesn't really want to depict very gruesome scenes. So maybe we've been harsh on AI, asking it to help us with some of these moments from history. There's a lot of smoke around. To me, it suggests I think there might have been a little cannon involved. No cannon on the battlefield for another couple of hundred years, so sorry about that, AI. The point about the Battle of Hastings is that the English shield wall was a densely packed formation of infantry. They stood there immovable on top of this ridge, and they let the Normans and their allies attack them again and again and again, like waves crashing on a beach. And I suppose you could argue this is a depiction of that very, very tightly packed shield wall. I don't know where they've got these yellow swishing capes from as well. I think the AI's been watching movies. These guys are all perfectly equipped with exactly the same gear. Harold did have a group of household knights called housecarls. They would have had very similar gear, but the majority of English troops Hastings were part-time soldiers, men who put down their farm tools and picked up their weapons upon the request of the king.
Wait, what?
No battle axes. The English were famous for having these enormous double-handed axes. None of those to be seen. A lot of spears, which is true. Few swords. What's remarkable about the markings on Harold's breastplate and horse, and by the way, the breastplate's like a strapless dress. I don't know how that's being held up. A little bit crusade-y, the bloody cross of crusade, but I think the AI's pulled back a bit and panicked about that, so we haven't quite got that. And what's going on that horse's flank? I do not know, nor do I intend to look at it for much longer because it's deeply disturbing. I'm passionate about the 11th century, and I just find this is just like a personal insult. It's painful to me to look at this with my eyes, so I can't do that anymore. I'm giving this a 2, I'm sorry. What we got here? Now, this could be one of several European explorers meeting indigenous people in the age of exploration, if you want to call it that, the age of European expansion. Is that Columbus? He's dressed a bit like a hippie.
It is Christopher Columbus.
Christopher Columbus never got to the American mainland. He visited the islands of the Caribbean and the Bahamas, and this would be him interacting with those people. This is a rather generous impression of that interaction. His relations with the local people he met were usually pretty violent. The ship is wrong, but I'm a ship geek, so I would say that, wouldn't I? Is it 1492?
1492,
Yeah.
Columbus sailed the Ocean Blue.
Columbus sailed the Ocean Blue, and he arrived in the Caribbean with incredibly negative consequences for these people here, because Columbus would bring the double whammy. Not only would he and his successors enslave the indigenous people, put them to work on plantations growing things like sugar, but they would also be wiped out by the diseases, which no one, to be fair, knew about, that were being carried by this crew on this ship. Eurasian diseases, unknown in the Americas, and so these people had no resistance to them at all. So something like 90% of the population of the Americas, 90% would perish from European disease in the 150 years or so after this man landed on these islands. This ship, which could be the Pinta, one of his ships, it's way too big. There are only 26 men on board, and it was only about 50 foot long. Fascinating, really, how small these vessels were and how small the numbers of people who took part in these expeditions that would just change the course of history. Columbus arrived in the Bahamas in the middle of October 1492. He did meet and talk to the locals, described as Caribs subsequently. He said they had gold earrings. He was very excited by that because he thought there must be a source of gold nearby. The mast and the sail plan is not quite right, but I can forgive them that. There were 2 masts with a 3rd little mast, so that's not too bad. Columbus himself, I don't know what's going on here. He was 41 when he landed. And I'm a little sensitive about these things. I'm in my 40s now, but he looks much older than 41, even though he'd had a hard life. I think he would also not have been wearing this Burning Man outfit. He would have dressed as a Spanish nobleman. He was very proud on that count. So he'd have been wearing very obviously European clothes. And these encounters were fraught with danger. So he would have been armed and he would have had people around him. I don't think he would have been meeting with the indigenous people by himself like this, surrounded. Columbus was actually Italian. He was from Genoa in northern Italy. And he was only there acting for the Spanish because he'd managed to persuade the king and queen of Spain that he could head out across the Atlantic Ocean and arrive in the Indies, what he called the Indies, which is, roughly speaking, China, India, the Philippines, Indonesia. He'd fundamentally miscalculated the circumference of the Earth. So he thought it'd be a short journey across from Spain to get to Japan, effectively. Now, he's one of the luckiest men in the whole of human history. If he hadn't hit the Americas, if it had just been ocean, if it had been all the way from Cadiz in Spain to Japan, they would have died in the middle of some gigantic ocean. I don't really like this image. He's come as a sort of a savior figure. He's dressed in white. He's surrounded by all these kind of adoring disciples who are smaller than him, gazing up at him. It's pretty messed up, AI. I don't know what's going on in there, but you need to have a word. I don't know. I'm giving this a 3.
I mean, it's still pretty generous, Dan.
Do you think that's generous? Maybe I'm being too nice. The image of Columbus is so weird. What is he dressed as? Why is he so old? People have got anachronistic stuff all over the place. The ship is not the right shape. It's far too big. And politically, I'm a little bit scared by this. It's getting a 2. I'm not happy with it, folks. I have a sense of impending dread. Let's see. Okay. It's medieval. It's European. It could be Joan of Arc.
No, it's not Joan of
It's
Arc.
not Joan of Arc.
Also, it's not medieval. It's actually from the Tudor period.
Okay, it's Tudor. Is it okay? So it's fine. Tudor. Anne Boleyn.
Yeah, it's the execution of Anne.
Execution of Anne Boleyn. Tower of London. Okay. I don't know why so many beetroots. Was that something you requested? I don't think that appears on the historical record. There is a lot wrong with this image. I don't know what all these people are doing here. Anytime you say to AI, show me the olden days, they just put a forest of spears in there. What's going on? Whose army has come to watch this execution? She was executed just outside the White Tower, which this could be the White Tower. It doesn't have a big entrance like that. But never mind. She was executed just outside the White Tower in the heart of the Tower of London. But they built a special scaffold for her, a wooden structure, so she was raised. She stood on the scaffold in a grey dress, not this bright red dress. And she was apparently in quite lively spirits. She gave a speech. She's very nice about her husband, Henry VIII, even though he'd just ordered her to be executed. Some people may think that's because she expected a last-minute reprieve from Henry. Anne Boleyn was the second wife of Henry VIII. He was infatuated with her, but he came to think he'd been bewitched. He wanted a child. He wanted a son. He wanted a son to continue his rule, his dynasty, his legacy. That Anne Boleyn had not delivered a healthy baby son. She'd had several miscarriages and stillbirths. She'd had a daughter, Elizabeth, and I'm sure nothing would ever come of her. And so in 1536, Anne Boleyn was arrested. And it is a hell of a rap sheet. She was accused of high treason, adultery, and incest. Yes, she was accused of sleeping with her brother. Most historians think there is absolutely no evidence for that at all. She was killed not with the axe, which was common, but with a swordsman, specially brought over from France because he had that extra bit of skill. He could sever the head in one go, make death as painless as possible. It was not unknown in the Tudor period for the axeman, the executioner, to have a few too many drinks, get chopping, and miss the first few blows. So it took a while to actually kill the victim. It's the 17th of May, 1536. Henry VIII wasn't there. He did not like typically to watch the executions which he'd ordered. There's something interesting about this that the AI has got wrong. She's got some Joan of Arc energy, or maybe she's got Mary Queen of Scots energy. Mary Queen of Scots was killed by her cousin Elizabeth I in 1587. And she apparently wore a red dress, and she's been seen as more of a martyr, which I think the AI is plugged into here. After she was beheaded, her body was buried in an unmarked grave in the church right there in the Tower of London. They thought in the Victorian period they actually found Anne Boleyn's body, and there's a plaque on the floor there now, but historians now think that might be the wrong wife. Henry VIII also killed his wife, Catherine Howard, so it might be one of the two. This image shows lots of people watching the execution, and that was accurate. There were all sorts of people who were representative of City of London guilds, there were aldermen, there were all sorts of people there present for the execution of a crowned Queen of England. I'm a bit weirded out by this image. Difficult to even say what it was. She looks sad. It's in a castle. That does not look like Anne Boleyn. She was on a scaffold. I guess I give it a 2. And also, what is going on with the beetroot? Okay, here we go. Oh my goodness. This cannot be. This is a mess, this image here. We've got the Stars and Stripes. We've got the US flag. There are far, far, far too many stars on this flag, I think, for the period in which we are in. We've got a ship with an iron hull, very rusty iron plates on the hull, I think. 19th century ship. Some very confused water here. And then we've got a very unrealistic wooden rowing boat with a bunch of guys in it going into the fog. This does remind me of the Star Spangled Banner, "Oh say can you see by the dawn's early light," in the War of 1812 when the British were attacking Baltimore. When the smoke cleared in the morning, they saw that the American flag was still flying and they knew the British had failed to capture the fort. That's one option. However, I'm very disturbed by these people here, and I am wondering, given these are the most famous moments in history, is this supposed to be George Washington crossing the Delaware River?
It is.
If it's that, it's an outrage. People should not be allowed to create these. What you're asking me to do here is not only painful, unethical, it is dangerous. Every single thing about this image is nonsense.
But do you think we should censor it on the screen?
Yeah, I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan. You may have guessed. The flag is wrong. The ship is insane. I mean, we can't even deal with the ship. The ship just needs to be out of there. I don't know what's happening. There are some spears in this rowing boat. It's monstrous. It's monstrous. I guess it's an opportunity to talk a little bit about one of the most dynamic, the most striking and impressive moments of George Washington's military career. The American colonies, stretching from Maine down to Georgia, had rebelled against British rule in the 1770s. George Washington was a hero of the French Indian War, the 7 Years' War, when he'd fought for the British very wisely. And he had been given command of the American Revolutionary Army, effectively. And that army had had a series of defeats. They'd been pushed out of Long Island. They'd been pushed out of New York City. The British advanced. They'd retreated into New Jersey. They'd been pushed beyond the Delaware River into Pennsylvania. But deep in the winter, on Boxing Day, 26th of December, 1776, George Washington launched a daring counteroffensive. He crossed the Delaware River. In fact, he crossed it 3 times. They attacked in the early hours. It would have been far less sunny and bright than this. But they had to break ice to get across. And they made it across the river, and they inflicted a stinging defeat upon British and Allied German troops in Trenton and Princeton. And then he went back across the river, and then he attacked again. He really humiliated the British in the depths of winter. People say if it hadn't been for that bravery that he showed, if he hadn't got on the front foot, if he hadn't showed that the rebel colonies were still able to inflict defeats on the British, well, maybe the revolutionary energy might have just flowed away that winter. Maybe the colonies would have come back into the British fold. So it's seen as a pivotal moment in the struggle for independence from Britain. It's immortalised in one of the great paintings of American history, which shows George Washington crossing the Delaware. It's a wonderful painting. It has inaccuracies as well, of course. But compared to this, that image is like the Mona Lisa. This is not worth the paper it's printed on. They even got the wrong number of stars on the Stars and Stripes. There were 13 states, though. There should have been 13 stars. And the weirdest thing is that painting is one of the most easy to find images in the whole of US history. Just copy that. Do better, AI. Not just untrustworthy, but incompetent. 0 out of 10. I feel like I'm in the punishment block here. I'm in solitary. What's next? What's next? What's next? What's next? This is bad. Is it Aztec? Is it Cortes and Montezuma in November 1519?
It is, exactly.
This is horrible. Hernan Cortes invaded Mexico illegally. The governor of the Spanish Americas told him not to, but he landed on the coast of Mexico anyway. He burned his ships to give his men no choice, so we're not going back. And he advanced inland, and he got to what is now Mexico City, which was called Tenochtitlan at the time, a beautiful city. Now, it would have been the most beautiful city on earth. Tenochtitlan was surrounded by this great lake with floating agricultural fields on this lake, a fascinating ecosystem. Montezuma II, the ruler of the Aztec Empire, this empire that dominated much of what is now central and bits of northern Mexico, he came out to meet Cortes, this Spanish adventurer, conqueror, chancer, and they had a discussion. They exchanged gifts, gold and silver Aztec calendars. Can you imagine how much we'd have learned from those about Aztec belief systems and their worldview? Sadly, Cortes would melt both of them down for their monetary value in the months that followed. Cortes later claimed that Montezuma said, "Oh, I hereby willingly give over my entire empire to the King of Spain. I'm very excited to welcome my new overlords." It's reasonably unlikely that Montezuma did that. But to come back to this, I do not know where to start. Let's try and begin with something more vaguely we could describe as positive, which is the steps leading up to this building here. There is an Aztec temple building style that had lots of steps leading up to it. You could roughly describe them as stepped pyramids. They were much grander than that, much more sophisticated. That is just a pale, it's a shadowy, weak attempt to depict the Templo Mayor, these two magnificent temples in the heart of Tenochtitlan, like two mountains. The idea that they're only, look at these human beings, they're sort of 2 stories high. That's wild. These things would have dominated the city, some of the most spectacular architecture on the world at the time. But as for the way these people are dressed, I couldn't honestly tell you which is Cortes and which is Montezuma. The troops as well, no idea at all. Montezuma's troops were not clad in metal armour. That was the whole problem. This enormously sophisticated, this remarkable empire, but it had not mastered the technology of iron. They fought with obsidian, they fought with stone. I can never unsee that. My understanding of the past has become more clouded as a result of that image. The one weird postscript to this moment is that Cortes would go on to conquer the Aztec Empire. He was able to use European technology, but he was also able to mobilize allied indigenous groups. He didn't really like the Aztecs. They thought perhaps Spanish rule might be better, and they allied with him to topple the Aztecs. Cortes and Montezuma's daughter had a child together, who in turn had children. So Montezuma's descendants are currently living in Spain as part of the nobility. This image is so bad, I actually don't even think I can give it a 1, really. I don't think there's anything about it that's accurate at all. I think I have to give it a 0. I'm traumatized. Okay. Well, it's French. It's probably something to do with Napoleon. I say it's French. We've got the blue coat of a French infantryman. We've got a sort of faint bit of tricolour here. I want to say tricolour. I could be wrong. We could be looking at a different period. We've got some lancers here. We've got some horse. Napoleon used shock-mounted troops with lances. And there's something about the way the AI has sort of used this imagery of someone looking up and to the right, and sort of, it's got French revolutionary energy to it. So I'm going to say it's not Napoleon doing something. What's he up to?
So it is Napoleon, but it is depicting Napoleon escaping the island of Elba.
Napoleon escaping the island of Elba?
Yeah.
That was the instruction?
Yes.
On one level, I'm feeling more relaxed about my future and that of my children. The AI is not coming for you anytime soon, folks. You should take heart from this. This is Napoleon escaping the island of Elba. Well, is that meant to be the sea? Are there horses in the sea there?
Yes, that's water.
Wow. We have a pretty good idea of what Napoleon looked like. That doesn't look like Napoleon at all.
It kind of looks actually like a 1970s adult film star.
I agree. Not that I'm that familiar with that genre, but I'll take your word for it. An outfit that is not one that was worn by Napoleon, a hat that is just made up. Just made up. The man was a style icon for his bicorn hat. Why would the AI not know that? He did not have a strange condition which fused his hands together and allowed him to sort of place a sword into some sort of groove. On the 26th of February 1815, worryingly, while his British overseer was visiting his girlfriend in Italy, Napoleon escaped from the island of Elba, where he'd been sent after his defeat in the Napoleonic Wars. He'd lived there for a few months, but he got bored and he decided to return to France, try and seize back his empire. He slipped off with about 1,000 men in a couple of small ships, and he landed on the south coast of France, and soldiers flocked to his colours, and he was able to capture Paris. He then briefly ruled over France again, but was defeated at the Battle of Waterloo in June 1815 and was forced to abdicate again. People call it the 100 Days. It was a very short comeback tour for Napoleon. When he abdicated for the second time, he hoped he might be allowed to escape to America or even live in Britain. But no, they decided he was so dangerous. He was the most dangerous man in Europe, capable of overturning kingdoms by his mere presence, that they sent him to St. Helena, one of the most isolated places on earth, I think 800 miles or so from the nearest other speck of land. He lived miserably and he died in 1821. He looked nothing like this. His escape from Elba looked nothing like this. I could hardly tell what it was. It was a bit of a stab in the dark. The blue coat is sort of faintly reminiscent of what Napoleon would have worn, and the energy of the shot is quite resonant of the way that Napoleon is portrayed in kind of revolutionary French imperial art. So I'll give it a 1.
Dan, tell me, which one was your favorite and which one was your least favorite?
If you're asking me to choose between very bad outcomes, Stonehenge might have been the best. What's really interesting about Stonehenge is maybe that's because it's the oldest, and therefore my perception of what it would have looked like is confused, and I'm more willing to be guided by the AI. Because as we get more modern, we have other sources, we have accounts, we think we actually know what things look like, so I'm more discerning. Maybe this is just the weakness of me and my imagination, that I sort of look at this and think, well, yeah, that might be all right. So anyway, this is my least worst. But that's because the true events of the building of Stonehenge are shrouded in the depths of time. We know almost nothing about them. The worst is that image of, I can hardly say it, this image of the Battle of Trafalgar, which I'm taking outside with me to ceremonially destroy. Well, what I've really learned, folks, is that my team are sadistic. I must have done something very bad to annoy them, and that you've got to be careful when you see stuff nowadays. Exercise caution when confronted with anything on the internet, particularly images that look like they've been doctored or have been made by AI. They are super inaccurate. Well, folks, I hope you've enjoyed watching this. I hope you've enjoyed it more than I've enjoyed participating in it. And if you have, then please check out our History YouTube channel, because we've got historical videos. In fact, we've got a brilliant one on Stonehenge, we've got one on Hastings, we've got one on Trafalgar, we have got one on the assassination of Julius Caesar. So we've got all sorts of different periods, ancient, medieval, and modern. So check it out. Make sure you like and subscribe.
Thank you again to Surfshark for sponsoring this video. Click on the link in the description to get 4 extra months of online protection. And with a 30-day money-back guarantee, there's no risk to trying it out.